Repeat it 9,999 times in the ward. If it fails on the last time, then everything will disappear completely. Suddenly, the mind-reading system arrived and made me curry favor with my wealthy fiancé who was in a coma on the hospital bed. However, I didn't take it seriously anyway, the rebirth was bound to fail. So in front of my fiancé, I just ignored him. As a result, the next day I found that everything was normal. But my fiancé was woken up by me hitting him. "Miss Nova, it's time for you to go to the hospital now." I woke up again and found myself standing by the roadside, and the person who had just spoken was the very familiar butler. Before I could get ready, I was dragged away by two burly bodyguards beside me. System, did I fail again? I used my inner thoughts to talk to the system in my mind, but all I got in response was silence. However, I wasn't in a hurry. After all, I already knew the following plot by heart. When we arrived at the hospital, the butler took me to the ward that I would never forget in this life. "Miss Nova, I hope you remember that you were hired to complete the task. If you can't," seeing the butler make a gesture of slashing his neck, on the surface, I pretended to be panicked. But actually, I was already used to it and could even be sarcastic to him. The butler opposite me, seeing how scared I was, got a few more wrinkles on his face. "It's time to go in and take care of your fiancé." As soon as he finished speaking, I was pulled into the ward by the bodyguards again. Facing the luxurious and resource-wasting room, I pretended to be surprised. It seemed that I could hear the disdainful voices of the bodyguards and the butler. I ignored them and walked to the bedside, seeing the man who was only surviving with the help of a ventilator. He had a high-bridged nose and his bone structure was so beautiful without any flaws. Even though he was lying on the hospital bed, there was still a cold and stern look on his face. If it were in the past, I would surely be head over heels for a man like this. Unfortunately, he was a stumbling block on my road to success, the kind that made me want to vomit when I looked at him too much. After staring at him for about 3 seconds, I looked away. "I'm so thirsty. I want to drink water." A weak voice came to my ears and my eyes flickered. I casually glanced at the butler behind me and found that he was chatting with others as if he hadn't heard it. Having a guess in my mind, I turned to look at the man on the bed. A few seconds later, I heard that voice again. "Whoever gives me water to drink, I wish that person can succeed every time they cut prices on Pinduoduo." Me. I understood. The voice was from my fiancé. His consciousness was still there. Besides, as an all-rounder, I had acquired a new skill again. I was afraid that the thirsty man would die, so I deliberately asked the butler behind me. "Excuse me, can he drink water?" Hearing the voice, the butler and his companions all looked at me. And the butler said something that was a waste of time. "What's the point of drinking water?" I pursed my lips and swallowed the swear words that were on the tip of my tongue. "I'd like to splash water on your face, okay?" I saw his lips were dry and wanted to feed him some water. The butler said, "Do as you like," and then continued chatting with others. I went to the table and poured half a glass of water, and then without saying a word, I came to the man's side. Since the water was too hot, I didn't hold it firmly when I squatted down, causing a little water in the cup to spill out. Coincidentally, it scalded the man's lips. In an instant, his body kept twitching. I had never encountered such a situation before, so I immediately called the butler. "Come quickly. Is he possessed by evil spirits?" Until I heard the man's consciousness saying, "How dare you? You actually scalded me with hot water. I'll scare you to death. It's your whole family that's possessed by evil spirits." Me. So the inner world of the CEO is quite rich. Host. I was just a little late because the signal got stuck. As a result, is he going to die? I paused when I looked ahead. Oh, a new system has arrived. My name is Nova. I was lost when I was 5 years old and was picked up by my adoptive parents. I'm 22 years old now. Originally, everything was peaceful. Unfortunately, my adoptive parents' daughter was a Sasing fan. When the family had no money, they sold me. Then I was dragged to the ward and saw my wealthy fiancé who had no idea what was going on. Those people ordered me to kill my fiancé, but my kind heart didn't allow it. When they were about to wipe me out completely, I accidentally slipped and fell out of the window. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on this day and was bound to a system. However, no matter what the situation was, accidents always happened and I still died on this day. But every time I was reborn, there would be a new system, which also made me an all-round player. Now it's already the 10,000th time. According to what the first system said, if I fail again when I'm reborn for the 10,000th time, I'll be dead, but I don't care anymore. Anyway, I didn't succeed in the previous thousands of times, so it's impossible to succeed this time. So when my so-called fiancé started twitching, I just stood there motionless. In a corner where no one noticed, I talked to the system. System, do you mean that if he dies, I'll die too? To be precise, if he dies, you'll go to the 18th level of hell and be judged by the god of death. It's unbearable for ordinary people. So what if it's hell? I snorted coldly. Then what are we waiting for? Saving people is important. I don't want to commit more sins after death. A few minutes later. The patient is okay. Just be careful with things when you deal with the patient next time to avoid a recurrence. While speaking, the doctor looked at me from time to time, and his expression seemed to show that he had a feud with me. Immediately after that, the butler, who had a fierce look on his face just now, suddenly had a flattering smile on his face. Dr. Asher, this is the young master's fiancée. It's her first day here today and she's a bit naive. I'm sorry for the trouble she's caused. So she's Damien's woman. The doctor's tone didn't seem very pleasant. His gaze towards me immediately became scrutinizing. I stared at the scene in front of me and didn't say a word. The reason those people wanted a scapegoat was because of him. This man was Asher, Damien's childhood friend. He had once said that if anything happened to Damien, he would find out the truth no matter what and he would dig deep into it. So when he saw me harming his brother, his face looked extremely unpleasant. And the following time, I was asked to leave the ward by the butler. Looking at the white clouds in the sky, I was lost in thought for a moment. Regarding Damien's background, it took me over a dozen times to get a little bit of information out of the butler's mouth. When he was 10 years old, his parents died in a car accident and he inherited all their estate. However, some relatives objected and thought of evil ideas every day to harm him. Damien had to be careful, but there was a traitor, which led to him having a car accident just like his parents. Finally, he fell into a coma. I couldn't help but click my tongue inwardly. They were all pitiful people with tragic experiences. Miss Nova, the doctor has left. You can go in now. Suddenly, the butler's voice reached my ears. I blinked my eyes and walked straight into the ward. As soon as I entered, I heard the inner thoughts of the CEO. My little brother was here just now. It's a pity that I can't open my eyes to see you. So sad. I lowered my head and tried my best not to laugh. Sure enough, the mentality of the CEO was different from that of ordinary people. There's some movement. It seems that the person who scalded my mouth is coming. Hearing this sentence, my eyes sparkled and I slowly walked to Damien's side. I tried hard to squeeze out some tears and said in a trembling voice, "My fiancé, you can't die like this. If you die, I'll become a widow." Then, I heard a sharp outburst from the other side, "Who's your fiancé? Don't talk nonsense. You're ruining my reputation." I sneered inwardly. Then I ignored him. In the previous attempts, I took care of him and was also on guard against unexpected incidents, but in the end, it was all in vain. When I opened my eyes, I was still on the roadside. So this 10,000th time, I'm going to be myself. While Damien was cursing the people who caused his car accident, I secretly ran to the blind spot of the surveillance camera and picked up an apple to eat. A second later, I quietly started a few games. After getting a pentakill, I excitedly shouted, "Finally dead." Unfortunately, Damien heard it and he started complaining again about what I had done. I was so annoyed by his complaints that I held the apple in my mouth, turned around and walked to the bedside, carefully looking at him. I wanted to know how a man in a coma could still be babbling in his mind. This person is walking over again. Is she going to talk nonsense again? I raised my eyebrows, held the big apple in my mouth with my hand, bent down and deliberately got close to Damien's face. My breath on the tip of my nose blew onto his eyes and I moved my ears, Why do I smell an indescribable smell? Did she do something bad? I shook my head. CEO, you're doomed. Your brain is damaged by the coma. On the 5th floor, are you still choosing heroes or not? If not, get lost. Suddenly, there was a scolding voice from my phone and I was startled. Coincidentally, the big apple in my mouth slipped out of my mouth and my hand. Finally, it fell onto the patient's forehead below. Ouch, what is it? It hurts so much. Me. Do you believe it grew legs by itself? The next second, I heard a beeping sound. Looking up, I saw that the electrocardiogram had gone flat. Doctor, come quickly. He's dying. Host, I finally understand what the systems meant when they said this batch was the worst. I could hear the system's words clearly, but now was not the time to argue. It was time to save lives. An hour later, Asher came out of the emergency room wearing a mask. A group of people gathered around him to ask about Damien's condition, and I was forced to lean against the corner, staring at them, looking weak and helpless. Miss Nova, please come here. Asher didn't reply to the people in front of him immediately. Instead, he looked up at me, being stared at inexplicably. I walked over silently. What's coming will come. Maybe this man had complaints and would slap me in the face. With this guess, I immediately clenched my fist and put it behind my back, getting ready to defend myself, and the people around also thought that Asher was going to hit me and seemed to have already taken a stance to stop the fight. Until the other side bowed and said, Miss Nova, thanks to your accident, Damien has improved. Thank you. Me. Is that even possible? Immediately after that, Damien was pushed out and taken back to the ward. I noticed that his complexion was indeed much rosier than before, but I couldn't hear his inner thoughts anymore. Was it malfunctioning? The system knew what I was thinking and quickly replied, Host, I'll go to the headquarters to check. But don't worry. Maybe he's fallen into a deep coma and doesn't have consciousness for a long time. I silently nodded and then entered the ward. The good news was that on the other side of Damien, I had my own little bed and a quilt. The bad news was that there were less than 6 hours left until the end of the day. To say that I didn't care about my life was actually a lie. What I was afraid of was that after my death, my adoptive parents' family would cause harm to society. During this period of time, I stayed in bed all the time. I would never get down unless there was something urgent to avoid accidents. On the way, neither the system nor other people showed up, and I couldn't hear Damien's inner thoughts either. So I could only rely on myself. With less than 4 hours left until the end, I sat on the bed quietly waiting for the arrival of the next day. Suddenly, my vision became blurred and I felt more and more sleepy. At this time, I already understood, even without accidents, I would die forcibly. This was fate. The next second, I fell onto the bed. The morning breeze blew gently, floating into every corner of the room. But someone came in and didn't like what he saw. Miss Nova, you're still sleeping. In a daze, I heard a familiar voice. It was the butler. This sleep was so comfortable. I yawned, thinking that I had never slept so peacefully. Miss Nova, of course it's comfortable, because it's already 11 o'clock. I realized something was wrong and immediately opened my eyes to look at the scene around me. In front of me was the other side of the luxurious hospital from yesterday, and there was the fierce butler. It was no longer the roadside. Looking at the mobile phone in the butler's pocket, I took it out without caring about his reaction. The screen lit up and the time. 3:11 on the second day. My heart almost stopped beating and my fingertips gripping the phone were trembling. I've slept for so long. It's already the next day. For the 9,999 times before, I had never been as happy as I was now. In my memory, every time when the time came, everyone forgot what I had done, making me feel like I had achieved nothing. Now I'm back. I'm going to take back everything that belongs to me. Then I was scolded by the butler, but I wasn't angry, because in my eyes he wasn't even worth mentioning. After that, a phone call came in. The butler immediately snatched back the mobile phone and gave me a glare. The voice on the other end of the phone was so loud that even I, an outsider, could hear it clearly, but he seemed extremely impatient. Butler, Damien has woken up. Both I and the butler were startled and exclaimed in unison, What? He's awake? Outside the ward, I kept sighing as I held the eye drops given by the butler. Suddenly the system appeared and was puzzled when it saw my appearance. Host, the end of the loop is a good thing. Why do you still look so melancholy? I clicked my tongue. If Damien doesn't remember what I did, everything will be fine. But if he does, it'll be bad. Looking at the crowd in the ward, my eyes flickered. It was reasonable to suspect that the end of the loop was related to him. Miss Nova, the young master wants to see you. Suddenly the butler came out of the room and gestured with his eyes towards the things in my hand. I pursed my lips, hesitating. Will my cover be blown? I've heard that he's very sharp and can tell if someone is an enemy at a glance. Don't worry. He has lost his memory. He only knows that he had a car accident and knows nothing about the rest. I raised my eyebrows. Was he made stupid by being hit on the head with an apple? I put away the eye drops and entered the ward with a skeptical attitude. As soon as my left foot stepped across the door, the ward instantly fell silent. The people around were staring at me menacingly, just like a little rabbit that had accidentally wandered into a pack of wolves. Young master, Miss Nova is here. As soon as the words were spoken, the onlookers immediately made way for me. I looked at the man on the hospital bed, pursed my lips, and slowly approached him. Damien, you're finally awake. Tears in my eyes fell like pearls, making me look so pitiful, but the man in front just looked up and stared at me for a few seconds, then curled his lips with an indifferent smile and said, "What did you call me?" The words came out of his throat in a casual manner, as if he was very unfamiliar with it. Damien had been in a coma for a whole month. It would be strange if there were no problems. My eyes flickered. When I looked at him, I didn't hear any inner thoughts. Then I squatted down to be at the same level as him and said very seriously, Sawadika. Can you understand what I'm saying? Seeing that Damien still didn't react at all, my mind was racing and I spoke again. Yoshi. You understand, tell me everything. After I finished speaking, I felt the air around me freeze and become stiff. A few seconds later, as if I understood something, I nodded and then burst into tears. Damien, you've forgotten me. What about our vows of eternal love? Damien opposite suddenly looked at me. They're idioms. Me. Just as I was about to play the part of someone on the verge of a breakdown, a low and slow voice reached my ears. So it's this person who scalded my mouth. Just like those people, she looks muddled and does stupid things in a messy way. Me? So all this acting was in vain. Host, since the loop has been broken, the station has specially sent you a big task gift. I hadn't even recovered from hearing Damien's inner thoughts when I was interrupted by the system. I hope the big gift isn't something messy. In my impression, tasks related to men were basically about being a savior, but after experiencing thousands of deaths, I didn't want to be trapped in shackles anymore. And what the system said next almost made me go crazy in public. Host, the task is to make Damien's trust value reach 100%. If it drops below 5, there will be random punishments. If this task is successful, you can get unrestricted rebirth. If it fails, you'll disappear forever. After hearing this, I sneered inwardly. Looking at Damien's handsome face, I couldn't help but want to rush up and slap him a few times, then announce in public that this guy hadn't lost his memory at all. But reality didn't allow me to do that. I stared at Damien opposite me with affectionate eyes, and he was no exception. To outsiders, it seemed that this new couple might have a future together. But in fact, only I knew how much Damien disliked me. How could a nice woman be with those scoundrels? It's really an eye-opener. I really didn't want to hear his nagging voice, so I simply played my part well. Damien, I know you're weak now and need to rest, so I won't disturb you. The moment I turned around, I heard voices from two sides at the same time. She can't even hold on for a while. No wonder she almost killed me. Beep. The trust value has decreased by 10. The current trust value is -30. Please get ready, host. If it continues to drop within 3 days, there will be punishment. Me, damn it. During the day, many of Damien's relatives and friends came to visit him. As his fiancée, I was forced to show up. Miss Nova, this is the young master's second uncle. Hello, second uncle. I forced a smile and stood at the door of the ward. Watching Damien's friends come in one after another and leave after chatting for less than 2 minutes, I couldn't help but click my tongue inwardly a few times. I understand. They just came to check out the inheritance. However, Damien on the hospital bed, with his seemingly indifferent appearance and his unique inner thoughts, made me feel relieved. As the sky gradually darkened, the number of visitors gradually decreased. After finishing my duty of standing guard, I dragged my heavy steps and was about to leave. Who knew that just as I turned around, I was stopped by that annoying butler. He took me to a deserted corner, looked around nervously, and carefully held out something in his hand. Here are sleeping pills. Feed them to him at night. Staring at the pills as big as lollipops, I fell into deep thought. Butler, won't the reason for his death be a sudden recovery before dying? That's none of your business. Anyway, just feed them into his mouth. You'll get 3 million if you succeed. Hearing this, I widened my eyes. How much? How much did you say? It's almost the same as my annual salary. It's not worth it. When I was about to seriously refuse, my mobile phone in my pocket suddenly rang. The person on the other end was very surprised when the call was answered. Scarlett, are you agreeing to come out of retirement? I was stunned for a few seconds and didn't react to what it meant. Renew your breakup counselor qualification certificate quickly, or you'll have to take the exam again, although you just need to go through the motions. Hearing this sentence, I instantly sobered up. Before entering the loop, I had obtained a breakup counselor qualification. I specialized in catching cheating partners and persuading them to divorce or break up. The success rate was 100%. And I was almost like a terrifying love terminator in the world of couples, until I entered the loop. In the consciousness of outsiders, I had disappeared for a month. During that period, my friends had called me many times, but unfortunately, no one answered. So the person on the phone was so shocked. I inadvertently looked up and saw the butler who had already left. I raised my eyebrows slightly. Did he not want me to use the sleeping pills anymore? But now it was related to my future, so I simply didn't care about him anymore. I'll get new ones tomorrow. Also, tell those people that the most powerful breakup counselor is back. You're really something that could move me to tears. While speaking, I casually put my hand into my pocket and unexpectedly touched something unexpected. Damn butler, always doing bad things. What was in the palm of my hand was none other than the sleeping pills that the butler had handed to me not long ago. So how did he put them into my pocket? In the evening, while Damien was taking a shower, I sneaked into his ward. Since the patient was still in the hospital and I was his fiancée, I should take care of his daily life. So I crushed the pills into powder and carefully put them into his water glass. The powder sank into the water bit by bit. Then I found that the water was cold and the powder couldn't dissolve at all. It was particularly obvious under the light at the bottom of the cup. One could tell at a glance that the water wasn't clean. Nova, what are you doing? The sudden cold voice caught me off guard and scared me so much that I dropped the water glass directly onto the ground. Crash! The water glass was immediately shattered into pieces. And there was a sense of stiffness in the air. Nova, for the last time, what are you doing in the ward? The low, cold voice came from the man's thin lips. His eyes had a sharp, cold light in them and there was a murderous aura surging around him. I knew that a pale explanation wouldn't work at this moment, so I simply had tears in my eyes, with an extremely affectionate yet sad expression. I haven't drunk any water all day. I wanted to ask you for some water to drink. But there's only yours here. We used to share a glass of water before, so I was going to take yours. Is that so? He stared at me, looking gloomy, guarded, and his gaze was as cold as a sharp blade. I don't believe it. Beep. The target's trust value has decreased by 10. I touched the things in my handbag, my eyes flickering slightly. I didn't speak at this time. Nova, what exactly is your purpose? Damien came close to me, and his eyes became inquisitive and playful. Strangely enough, this time I didn't hear his inner thoughts but the system's warning instead. To beep. The target's trust value has decreased by 20. Since the trust value is too low, the random punishment starts now. At that instant, I felt a piercing pain in my body and mind. Host, it'll be over in a dozen seconds. You must hold on. I'll report to the superior to cancel this punishment. The system was shouting crazily in my mind. I heard every word clearly, but unfortunately, I didn't have the strength to respond, probably because I looked so pale that Damien frowned slightly. Nova, if you're going to die, don't die in my room. I gritted my teeth and clenched my fists, but the pain was continuous. Host, there are 10 seconds left. Gradually, I felt that the closer it got to the end, the more painful it became. I had no choice but to add some drama at this point. Damien, there's a pill in my pocket. Help me take it out. The person opposite lowered his head and just looked at me without any emotion. After a while, he said, "Are you crazy?" Without thinking, I replied directly, "You're crazy. Your whole family is crazy." 3 seconds later, I saw Damien's back as he left. I immediately realized what I had just said. I've had a bad heart since I was a child. I don't know if it was an illusion, but I actually felt Damien pause for a moment, but since I was acting, I had to play it through. I took out the bottle of quick-acting heart relief pills from my pocket. Then I took one and swallowed it. After waiting for a few seconds, the pain in my body slowly disappeared. Host, I remember you don't have a heart disease. Hearing this, I nodded seriously. If I'm not sick, why would I take medicine? There are just candies in it. Besides, is this always the punishment? Not always. Since it's random, I don't know either. But I'll report to the superior to make the host suffer less. System, thank you for being with me. Because of you, I feel warm all year round. I deliberately bent down. Immediately after that, someone saw me. The person saw that I was looking at him and immediately panicked and ran away. Young master, Miss Nova is sick. Me. I'll say it again. I'm really not sick. The next day, I abandoned Damien and went out alone in broad daylight. Scarlett, it's been a month. You seem to have changed a lot. On the street, Scarlett pulled me to chat. Originally, I wanted to take her to a high-end restaurant, but suddenly I felt that this kind of treatment wasn't worth it for my old best friend who hadn't seen much of the world. And she had the same idea as me, so we just chatted simply. During the month you disappeared, I almost thought you had been sold. I just smiled and didn't say anything. That's right. I was tricked by the system to be reborn. That I thought I would be at the peak, but in the end, I was just a clown. While talking, Scarlett suddenly changed the topic. Is your certificate ready? Once it's done, get to work quickly. Those people are going crazy waiting for you. This time it's about a husband who's been abusing his wife. Whenever the wife wants to divorce, she gets beaten. So, are you ready? By this time, I had already changed into my own clothes. The Chong Sam with an antique charm and the casually pinned-up hairpin made me look noble and mysterious. I gave Scarlett a calm smile. Let's go, friend. It's time to save the world. 10 or so minutes later. At a certain house. I took the documents from Scarlett and gracefully handed them to the person opposite. Mr. Zhen, these are the evidences we've collected that you've been abusing your wife and that you've attempted to murder her. The police will arrive quickly in less than 10 minutes. The man opposite turned pale. He slapped the table hard. However, since it was made of granite, his palm instantly turned red. The man pointed at me angrily and said, "Who do you think you are? Why are you collecting false evidence? I'll appeal." Hearing this, I casually spread my hands and the corners of my mouth curled up with a sarcastic arc. Then do you know why the state allows this profession to exist? Without waiting for his reply, I spoke again. Abusive man, don't even think about getting out in this lifetime, because you're sentenced to life imprisonment. After saying that, I looked at the woman on the other side. She had her hair disheveled and her eyes were always dull. Even when it was announced that she had won, there was still no reaction on her face. And her body was covered with bruises from being kicked and burned without exception. I narrowed my eyes and my expression became colder. Seeing me roll up my sleeves, Scarlett beside me immediately understood. Pay attention to the strength. There are regulations in the country. It'll be your responsibility if you kill him. Half an hour later. When the police arrived at the scene, they found that the suspect had been beaten black and blue. Just as they were about to speak, They saw me there and immediately put on big smiles on their faces. "Miss Nova, long time no see. Every time you take action, it's like getting rid of evil for the people." Seeing the stunned look of the abusive man as if he was shocked by my relationship with the police, I couldn't help but show a look of disgust. I waved my hand at the police and then left. As for the woman who regained her freedom, I let her go with the wind. The first case of saving the world was over and I still took Scarlett to a high-end restaurant. I hadn't even taken the third bite when the second case of saving the world came. It was a wealthy woman. She said that the husband she had supported for many years had come out of the closet and was now in a bar with a man. I rushed to the scene in the blink of an eye. I thought everything would go smoothly, but I was stopped at the door instead. "Excuse me, miss. There's an important guest here today. No one is allowed to enter without special instructions." I stared at the 4 burly bodyguards and narrowed my eyes slightly. They looked so familiar. Thinking about it, I took out my mobile phone and accidentally clicked on the butler's phone number, and then I understood. So these were 2 of the bodyguards who had tied me up and taken me to the hospital at that time. I confidently showed my face and smiled at the 2 of them and said, "Brothers, I'm Nova. Do you still remember me?" Who would have thought that the 4 bodyguards said in unison, "Please don't try to get close to us, miss." Me. I couldn't bear it anymore, so I could only say quietly, "Is Damien inside? I'm his fiancé." As soon as the words were spoken, the 4 bodyguards all looked at me and then made way for me. Their eyes were a little excited. I knew they were looking forward to seeing a good show, but I didn't care and just walked straight in. At the same time, the wealthy woman called. She asked me if I could catch the other person. I replied very confidently, "Madam, don't worry." As someone who strikes fear into the hearts of couples, my success rate is 100%. There has never been a failure. Walking into the bar, I saw that the dance floor, which should have been lively, was unusually quiet at the moment. At that time, I didn't notice anything wrong at all. Until the wealthy woman said an extremely important sentence to me. "I found out that the man who came out of the closet has reserved the whole bar. How did you get in?" At the same time, I looked up and happened to see a familiar man slowly coming down the stairs, followed by a sunny and cheerful young man who looked like a little rascal. I tried hard to cover my mouth and my eyes flashed with a complex emotion of disbelief. "Is your husband blonde-haired?" "Yes, have you seen him?" "So what does the man who reserved the bar look like? Is he richer than me?" The wealthy woman became more and more excited and almost burst my eardrums. But at this moment, my expression was as uncomfortable as if I had eaten something disgusting. "Madam, believe it or not, that man is indeed richer than you. Moreover, he's the so-called fiancé of the person who took on this task." Coincidentally, Damien, who was coming down the stairs, seemed to notice my gaze by accident. He seemed very surprised. The young man beside him sensed that something was wrong and quickly turned his head. Then he said, "Damien, someone's here. What should we do?" "Me? It's so explosive. No wonder Damien has stayed away from women for more than 20 years. There's a reason for it." Seeing the 2 men opposite hugging each other tightly, I vaguely felt that I had become the third wheel. The wealthy woman's phone call hadn't been hung up. She seemed to have foreseen something and was silent for a few seconds. "Master, is he really rich?" I looked at the people with their arms around each other's shoulders in front of me and said with great sympathy, "Let's put it this way. Basically, everything you eat and wear comes from his family. Besides, I'm also at the scene of a scandal right now." After saying that, I said goodbye to the wealthy woman and then hung up the phone. I looked up at them. At this moment, the air around me was filled with awkwardness. Damien seemed very surprised by my arrival. He looked me up and down and his eyes became inquisitive and playful. "Nova, what are you doing here?" I pursed my lips and my mind was racing. "I have a friend who's pregnant. She said that her husband hasn't come home for a long time. She wanted me to look for him, but I didn't expect that your husband was here." "Really?" I nodded sincerely and then I heard his inner thoughts. Only a fool would believe that. It must be those people who tipped her off and then she put on this melodramatic act. My eyelids twitched and I shifted my gaze to the young man beside him. He didn't know me, but judging from the shock on his face, I could tell that this person must have a close relationship with Damien. I was afraid that my proud success rate would be slapped in the face, so I carefully asked, "Sir, may I ask who that is?" Damien casually glanced at me and said in an indifferent tone, "It's none of your business." My expression froze. "Where's the knife? Where's the 40-meter-long knife? Don't be shameless when I'm being nice." Sensing the awkward atmosphere, the young man beside me hurriedly smoothed things over. "Pretty girl, I'm his friend. I own this bar. Who are you looking for?" I looked away from Damien and directly looked at him, smiling and saying, "My friend is Muqingying. She suspects that you have problems with your sexual orientation." "That's nonsense. I'm straight, okay?" Suddenly, the young man's expression froze and he stared at me in horror. "Are you Nova?" Seeing me nod, he widened his eyes. "So it's you, the Love Terminator." Hearing this title, I raised my eyebrows and just smiled faintly. I didn't care too much. Anyway, I was already used to dealing with these people. But Damien was different. On the surface, he had no expression, but in fact, he was puzzled inside. "What's the Love Terminator? It sounds like something from a childish plot." Before I could explain it to him, the young man beside him excitedly ran up to me, looking just like a little fanboy. "Master, you're really extraordinary as expected. Your taste in men might be a bit off, but it doesn't matter. You're still my idol." According to what the wealthy woman said, this guy was a top-notch childish teenager. He was extremely obsessed with anyone who was praised. That's why the wealthy woman was worried that he would count money for others even if he was sold. "You're exaggerating too much. Nova, it's time for you to go back." I had just opened my mouth when I was abruptly interrupted. Damien opposite had walked up to me before I knew it. His low voice seemed to carry a hint of anger. He stared coldly as if I was just something for him to vent his anger on. Until I heard his inner thoughts. "Idol? I think she's more like an elephant. And the Love Terminator? How come I didn't know about this?" Beep. "The target's trust value has increased by 10. I frowned slightly and my eyes flickered. I didn't expect this guy to be such a tsundere and strange man. Back in the ward, I took the initiative to confess everything about myself to Damien. "Damien, you've lost your memory, so it's normal that you don't know my identity. So now, I'm going to make a confession." Damien was sitting on the sofa. Only when he heard the last sentence did he raise his eyes and stare at me. I said seriously, "I'm a person with principles, so my profession is rather special, which means..." Cut to the chase. I paused and changed my words. "Nova, 22 years old, female, a breakup counselor. I've been doing this job for 5 years and I have a certificate issued by the state." Beep. "The target's trust value has increased by 30. I raised my eyebrows and smiled, then said with full confidence, "We fell in love at first sight. After spending a long time together, we got together. Now we were about to get engaged, but then this problem came up." While saying this, I sighed and had an extremely sad expression on my face. Damien's inner thoughts, "I don't believe it." Beep. "The target's trust value has decreased by 20. Me. You unbelieving guy. I might as well beat you to death." During Damien's hospitalization, in order to play the role of a thrifty fiancé well, I deliberately went to the butler and asked him to report Damien's 3 meals a day to me. Then I became Damien's personal dietitian. The reason was that the food looked so bad that it seemed it could poison people. Outside the ward, I took out the loving bento and handed it to the bodyguards at the door with a sincere attitude. "Gentlemen, could you please do me a favor and let me go in to see Mr. Damien?" But those people had no sense of propriety at all. Their expressions were so stiff that they seemed as if they were about to join the Communist Party. "Sorry, miss. The young master has ordered that your food isn't fit for people to eat, so he needs to rest these days." On the first day of cooking, I turned the eggs into black-hearted eggs and the rice into rice porridge, and then I handed them to Damien with great confidence. But when Damien took one look at it, he ran to the bathroom to vomit. The reason was that he had never seen such disgusting food before. But I wasn't discouraged and still insisted on cooking. Now basically the food is well cooked. There will never be a situation where I give others beans that haven't been fried properly. Gentlemen, could you please go in and say something? I guarantee that Damien definitely won't get angry this time, but the result was the same. I didn't even have a chance to step into the room. Damien, believe me. You'll regret it if you don't eat it. I tried hard to suppress my impatience inside. Outside, thousands of people ate her food and they always said it was delicious. Just when the food was about to be thrown away again, unexpectedly, the door of the ward was opened. It was Asher who opened the door. He still gave me a cold look. Damien has been busy with work these days. Please, Miss Nova, don't come to disturb him anymore. I immediately refuted, I'm his fiancée. Why can't I come? Hearing this, Asher suddenly sneered. It doesn't matter whether you are or not. What matters is your purpose. Asher, let her in. Suddenly, a deep voice came from inside the room. I clenched my fists, afraid of getting into trouble. Walking into the ward, I found that Damien had already changed into a suit and the things around had been tidied up. It seemed that he had plans to be discharged from the hospital. Damien, are you okay now? The other person just looked at me indifferently and said with his thin lips, Nova, where are your parents? I knew very well that if I didn't tell the truth, Damien would definitely investigate privately, so I planned to tell the truth. I'm an orphan. I was picked up by my adoptive parents when I was a child. That I don't know if he believed it or not, but I always had a feeling that his question wasn't simple. A few seconds later, sure enough, in his inner thoughts I heard the answer. If I say that my subordinates photographed you and the butler plotting something, I wonder how you'll respond. Damien's expression still didn't change, but a faint coldness flashed across the bottom of his eyes. The air around suddenly froze, but in the face of such a life-threatening situation, I didn't care at all. I held up the bento in my hand and said calmly, Damien, I spent the whole morning on this meal. Have a taste. It's definitely different from before. The man opposite couldn't help frowning, with an extremely disgusted attitude. He suspected me with the worst intentions. Why do you want me to eat this inedible stuff? Did you put drugs in it? I pursed my lips and tried my best to suppress my anger. Just as I was about to speak, I saw Damien slowly approaching me and sneering. Strangely enough, my subordinates photographed that you were very close to the butler and were even plotting something. So should I believe you? I stared at Damien, pretending to be angry and shifting the blame onto others. I didn't expect you to think of me like this. Well then, I'll ask the butler to come here and explain it clearly face to face. After saying that, I dialed the butler's phone number as quickly as I could in my life. Even Damien didn't react in time. As soon as the call was connected, I got straight to the point. Butler, Damien suspects that there's a plot between us. Come here quickly and explain it clearly. Then I hung up the phone directly and looked at Damien with sad eyes. Since Damien doesn't believe me, then let the butler come. A few seconds later, I heard his inner thoughts. Don't think that I'll believe you just because you're putting on this melodramatic act. Don't you know who I am? Beep. The target's trust value has increased by 20. My eyes froze and a faint doubt flashed across the bottom of my eyes. This guy must be out of his mind. When the butler came, I turned myself into someone who just echoed what he said. Whenever he said, right, miss? I would just nod my head. In the end, on the surface, Damien seemed to believe it completely, but in fact, it was still the same sentence. I don't believe it. But I always felt that he still trusted me quite a bit. It's just that no one would believe it if he said it out loud. I received a hint from the butler's eyes and quietly followed him without Damien noticing. As soon as we were alone, he scolded me harshly, saying that I had come up with bad ideas. I lied that it was a food strategy, but he mistook it for a beauty trap, and then he simply asked me to use my charm to win Damien over. When I returned to the ward, I found that Damien ignored me and even threw the bento I made into the trash can. I took all of this in and waited for my revenge. On the second day after Damien was discharged from the hospital, I was taken to the police station. The reason was that I was reported for suspected intentional murder along with a large number of people including the butler. And the person who reported it was actually Damien himself. At the police station, suspect Nova, female, 22 years old, was arrested on suspicion of a murder case. The policeman opposite looked at me seriously. After the other suspects left, his expression changed instantly. I mean, Scarlett, why are you here again? And you're in the exact same position as before. Hearing his words, I spread my hands and said helplessly, there's nothing I can do. I've offended someone who thinks my cooking is terrible. Hearing this, the policeman spat out the Dahongpo tea he was drinking. He was shocked all over his face. You? Cooked? And it was bad? I nodded. I didn't expect that my time as a retired cook was so hard to evaluate. Besides being a breakup counselor, I also had a hidden identity. I was the squad leader of the cooking squad in the local famous army. Because the food I cooked won over everyone in the army, and combined with my simple skills in grappling, I became the target in the new recruit class. Later, because my adoptive parents thought this job was unstable, I retired from the army. After becoming a breakup counselor, I was afraid of getting into the police station because of fights, so I often cooked for the policemen. After getting along with them for a long time, they learned about my identity. Now coming here again as a suspect, it just feels different. The policeman opposite saw that I was in a daze and couldn't help sighing. Scarlett, your current situation is not easy to solve. The informant has evidence and witnesses. However, the police station believes in you. Hearing this sentence, I was so moved that I was almost on the verge of crying. After all, every time I came to the police station, my ancestors for 18 generations would be checked over again. Suddenly, I remembered the deal between my adoptive parents and the butler, and my eyes flickered. An hour later. Mr. Damien, Nova, whom you reported, has been cleared of suspicion and was not involved in the intentional murder. I followed behind the policeman and looked at the stunned Damien with the corners of my mouth slightly raised. Little brother, unexpected, right? I'm not a bad person. Before this, I deliberately kept the evidence that my adoptive parents and the butler sold me, and I didn't expect that it would come in handy now. However, those who have already gone to prison probably still have no idea about my countermove. But it doesn't matter. After all, I learned from the system that Damien's trust value is currently rising. I still have to thank him for helping me get rid of future troubles. But the key now is that with the butler in prison, what reason should I use to get close to the target? This week, while getting close to Damien to gain trust value, I also continued to do the job of a breakup counselor. Due to the particularity and uniqueness of the profession, as well as the 100% success rate except for that one mistake, now I have not only become a feared master in the world of couples but also helped single people get rid of future troubles. Gradually, I became extremely popular on the internet and even topped the hot search list for a while. In order to let more people know about this profession, I deliberately abandoned the target and turned to do live broadcasts instead. With humor, magnanimity, craziness, and eccentricity, I became really popular in the circle, and the popularity was no less than when a top star's relationship was exposed. Later, I was invited to participate in a variety show for amateurs called Rise Up, Identity Swap, to experience the swapped occupations for a week. Originally, I planned to refuse until I found out that the organizer was Damien's company. And then I immediately became motivated. Immediately after that, I came to his residence. To put it bluntly, it was just the place where I usually worked. After all, according to his meaning, I'm not his fiancé now. Damien, I cooked today. Would you like to have a taste? I walked into his office with a bento in my hand. During this period, Damien took a fancy to my talent and kept me in his company as a cook in the back kitchen. Of course, I was more than happy to do so, and he was busy with work, just casually glanced at it and said casually, just put it on the table. I followed his request and silently put the bento in the designated position. Accidentally, I saw countless photos and resumes of new artists on the side and raised my eyebrows. Before leaving, I cleared my throat. "Sir, I'm planning to participate in Rise Up, Identity Swap. I don't know what your opinion is." It seemed that he was occupied with work matters, and Damien looked up at me. "Your own will is more important. I'm just giving you a little push." I didn't say anything more. I just didn't expect that this person respected me so much now. It felt a bit strange. The next second, I was really right in my guess. The butler and the adoptive parents are already in prison, but this person is still sticking around me. She must have other motives. Maybe she's another one who's trying to pry into my business. I got angry for a moment and then got angry again. After all this time, I'm still an outsider. I really thought that just because he's rich, he could think whatever he wants. But the reality is that rich people do have a lot fewer troubles. On the day of recording the variety show, when the director team learned that I was from Damien's company, they were secretly nice to me. Although I had no idea about it and even thought that this person was trying to use unspoken rules on me, when all the guests arrived, I found that one of them had a powerful background. "Nova, why are you here?" I looked at the person in front of me with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Long time no see, Violet." This person was the biological daughter of my adoptive parents who had already gone to prison. I didn't expect that she would also sign up. It was just a bit strange that the other guests were asked to play Saying fans. When everyone saw that I knew her, they all said it was a coincidence. But I knew very well that as long as Violet was here, something big would surely happen. The variety show started recording. I drew the occupation of a kindergarten teacher for another amateur, and Violet drew the occupation of a breakup counselor, which was my well-known profession. However, her Saying fan was privately changed to a fan site manager by others and was chosen by someone else. Then I went to the place I had drawn and didn't bother with her anymore. However, before this, I deliberately spent my own money to buy some things, which made the program team confused. "Teacher Scarlett, what did you buy these things from the supermarket for?" The camera was pointed at my face, but I just smiled indifferently. Each profession has its own specialty. For a profession like a kindergarten teacher, those who understand will naturally understand. When I saw the plaque at the entrance that said, "Xing Xing Kindergarten," I couldn't help but be stunned. "Teacher Scarlett, we should go in now." After being in a daze for a few seconds, I slowly walked into the kindergarten with steps. The system sensed my emotions and asked with a skeptical attitude, "Host, have you been to this kindergarten before?" My eyes moved. When I was a child, I accidentally wandered into this place. The then principal took me in, and when I grew up, I invested in the kindergarten. "So, host, what exactly did you do before?" This question is worth reflecting on carefully. After all, after being picked up by my adoptive parents, life became more and more difficult, and I had to choose to make a living. After entering the kindergarten, I found that it was not the previous principal who received me but a former young teacher. She told me that she was the vice principal and that the real principal had been taken away by an illness. So in her mind, the principal was still that person. Then the vice principal took me to the small class and said that this was the place where the girl who swapped identities with me stayed. Since it was just the start of the semester after the National Day holiday, as soon as the door was opened, the program team and I heard crying all over the classroom. The head teacher and the nursery governess were holding one child in their left hand and leading two others with their right hand. They looked rather funny. But for those who are really engaged in this profession, this is just daily routine. Obviously, the program team was shocked by this miserable scene. And the children were also frightened and didn't listen to instructions at all. The two teachers in the class noticed me. When I showed them the things in my hand, our eyes met and we instantly understood that we were in the same profession. Then the head teacher exaggeratedly said, "Children, look quickly. There's a beautiful sister at the door. She has specially brought delicious, sweet lollipops for the obedient children to eat." As she said this, the crying in the classroom gradually decreased. I thought it was time for me to come out. So I walked in, held up the bag brightly and said vividly, "Teacher is here to see which child is obedient. You can not only eat lollipops but also get a thumbs up." Suddenly, the classroom became silent. The program team seemed to be shocked. But the real shock was yet to come. When children went to the toilet for a big poop, teachers had to wipe their bottoms. When they wet the bed, teachers not only had to wash their pants but also the bed sheets. When the classroom was noisy, teachers couldn't get angry and had to stay calm. However, these kindergarten teachers thought it was normal, and even parents took it for granted. After a day of recording, the program team, which was full of energy in the morning, gradually became much more haggard. After returning to the assembly point, the guests didn't feel tired. Instead, the program team, which had been filming for a day, was crying out for help. So they asked us amateurs a question: "Dear teachers, how do you keep working for such a long time? You work so hard every day, but you are always on full attendance. How do you do it?" The 6 amateurs said in unison, "We have no power and no money. It's just the life of ordinary people." When I returned to the hotel, I found that someone had moved into the room next to mine. But I had clearly asked the staff that during the recording period, except for the guests, no one was allowed to stay on this floor. And the rooms of other people were far away from mine, so it was impossible to open another room. So, I stared at the room number and narrowed my eyes slightly. I took the initiative to knock on the door and put my hand behind my back, ready for defense. A few seconds later, the door was opened and I secretly gathered my strength. "Hello? Excuse me? Why are you here?" The person who greeted me was Damien, who I hadn't seen for a day but still felt familiar with. He seemed to have just arrived and was still wearing a professional suit. There was a faint look of tiredness on his face. He took a look and seemed dissatisfied with what I said. "It's my hotel. Why can't I come?" Damien leaned against the door frame with a look of provocation in his eyes. He stared at me casually, with a smile on his corner of his lips from time to time. His burning gaze made me look away, and my eyes seemed flustered, just a little bit more and I couldn't control myself from going up to slap him to death. This annoying, provocative man. And the other party didn't notice this detail. He put away his smile and said to me like a machine, "After the recording is over, the old man will come to the city. He has already recognized you as his granddaughter-in-law. So put on a good show for me at that time, just like when you plotted with the butler before." I was startled and quickly refuted, "Sir, my feelings for you are like a fish that will die without water, and a dung beetle that will be homeless without dung. How could it be acting?" I saw speechless on Damien's face. His inner thoughts were saying, "Nova, you're really good at describing things. But no matter what you say, I still think of you as a drama queen who's fighting for family property." But what Damien said next was the highlight moment of a real-life movie emperor. "Nova, you've worked hard during this period. I suddenly realized one thing. We must cherish the people in front of us, otherwise we'll regret it. I think this statement is quite reasonable." "Really? Do you really think so?" Facing Damien's cringy words, I felt as uncomfortable as if I had eaten shit. Help! I almost threw up. "Nova, since you like acting, let's see who can disgust the other first." Just like that, I was almost disgusted to death. The end of the full text. Just kidding. I cherish my life very much. The following recordings were much easier than the first day, and I was very generous. Every time I came, I had to bring a lot of delicious food to win over the children. I thought these snacks were green and healthy. They were all made with the help of my comrades in the cooking squad, so there should be no parents coming over to say they were junk food. When it came to the last day of recording, I found that the kindergarten had been carefully decorated. Then I saw a banner with my name on it. "Hello, Nova. Goodbye, Teacher Scarlett." I was stunned on the spot and couldn't recover for a long time. My heart seemed to skip a beat. Suddenly, I smiled with relief. It turned out that in this world, there were still people who remembered my past. When the variety show was broadcast for the first time, the program team and the amateurs received great praise. Among them, I quickly became popular with the persona of a little son, and combined with my original professional halo, many people called me the contemporary justice messenger. So the second episode of the variety show was also highly praised. But something unexpected happened. Less than half an hour after the second episode was broadcast, I was exposed to be in a relationship. Paparazzi released photos showing that I entered a room with a mysterious person in a hotel. However, there was no sound in the video. But netizens were not easy to fool and didn't believe what the paparazzi said at all. In the face of such a dangerous event, I went home with the mysterious person to meet the parents. If this was photographed again, maybe tomorrow there would be news that I had gone to the hospital to give birth. Then during the car ride, I deliberately took a picture of Damien's shoes and put my shoes together. Immediately after that, I posted a message with the picture. I can post it myself with my own hands and say it myself with my own mouth. You take sneaky pictures, you bear the consequences. Apparently, Damien beside me noticed my action. His face darkened a bit and his tone was extremely unhappy. Nova, what are you taking pictures of? Do you want to post it on some special websites and make more people fight for the family property? Hearing his inner thoughts, I immediately wanted to delete the newly posted message and then say that he didn't deserve it. Firstly, I didn't have that kind of intention. Secondly, Damien was really narcissistic. Finally, I hadn't provoked anyone. But the trust value was more important at present, so I simply showed him the content I had posted. With a face full of adoration, "Sir, my relationship with you is exposed," and then I angrily refuted the person who broke the news. Unexpectedly, as soon as Damien saw the content I posted, his eyes immediately became sharp. "Who asked you to take pictures? Delete them immediately." I hesitated to speak. "Sir, you know that if I delete them, that would be real news. Perhaps within 10 minutes, a piece of news would pop up. Nova was suspected of being threatened and was forced to delete her Weibo post. Why did you post these useless things?" Damien's sudden words left me dumbfounded. A few seconds later, I said quietly, "Probably because I don't want to see myself being wantonly speculated by strangers, and I also don't want you to be the target of various rumors on the internet because of this revelation." Damien stared at me closely, with emotions that were hard to understand, but a trace of stubbornness could be vaguely seen. "Nova, what exactly is your purpose?" Beep. The target's trust value has increased by 40. A slight surprise flashed across the bottom of my eyes. This seemed to be the highest increase ever. But I didn't know the criteria for adding points. It just felt so random. After arriving at the main residence, Damien helped me out of the car. According to my guess, it should be because I was wearing new Chinese-style clothes and it was inconvenient to get out of the car. Afraid that the old man's subordinates would peek, he simply pretended to be acting. The old man had the same temperament as young people. When he saw me, he talked to me like a close friend and told me everything. He could even tell the story of Damien being beaten for wetting the bed when he was a child. I couldn't stop laughing. "Nova, what's your impression of Damien?" Looking at the old man's sincere gaze, which was exactly the same as how I had looked at Damien before, I felt a pang of sympathy. "Actually, he's quite nice. It's just that he's very slow when it comes to feelings. Sometimes I want to open his head to see what's inside." It seemed that my sincere feelings made the old man stunned at first, and then he burst into a smile. "He's just like his father, a wooden block. He doesn't know that someone likes him that much." When it came to Damien's family, actually what I was more interested in was whether his parents really died in a car accident. After all, he himself fell into a coma because of a car accident. Just as I was about to continue asking, who knew that the system's voice made me interrupt the topic. Beep. The target's trust value has decreased by 20. I vaguely felt that Damien was behind me. When I turned around, I found that he was waving his mobile phone and looking at me with a half smile. I pursed my lips and hesitated. "Damien, what's wrong?" Beep. The target's trust value has decreased by 10. I originally thought that I had mentioned something sad about him, so I simply went to his side to comfort him. Who knew that Damien handed his mobile phone to me, with the corners of his lips tightened into a line and a faint, almost invisible flame hidden in his eyes. I took a look and saw that the hot search entry was my name, and an artist's name was tied in front of it. Chi Yinji publicly confessed his love to Nova. Who is this person? I frowned with a bad premonition in my heart. I clicked on the entry and saw the artist's photo. I felt it was more and more familiar. It seemed that I accidentally met this artist when recording the variety show a few days ago, but now he actually announced to the public that he fell in love with me at first sight. Besides, I had already posted that I had a partner. This undoubtedly meant that he wanted to be a third wheel. At this time, Damien directly pulled me away regardless of the old man's presence and took me to an empty room upstairs. As soon as we entered, I heard Damien's voice that sounded a bit stupid. Nova, as a public figure, you should know how to deal with this matter. I frowned slightly. It was hard not to suspect that he was going crazy. Then I said seriously, I probably understand. I should secretly find someone to get rid of him. The corners of Damien's mouth twitched. She's already planning to secretly get rid of someone and she still tells me that she has no background. She's lying to ghosts. Beep. The target's trust value has increased by 20. I listened to the system's voice with a poker face. It seemed that I was already used to the fluctuating trust value. Sir, how do you plan to deal with it? Damien smiled and said, it depends on your own will. Me. Damn it, finally, I took a risk and chose to play the part of a green tea. That night, I posted a Weibo post, which attracted the attention of netizens. Xiangli Yuxing. Presumably it's because of my title as a little son or the contemporary justice ambassador that made Teacher Chi have a liking for me. Thanks for that. After posting, I faced a major incident. The old man asked me and Damien to sleep in the same room. Sir, you sleep on the bed. It suits you. In the room, Damien and I, a man and a woman alone in the same room, it was inevitable that there might be some misunderstandings, but for me, there was no such thing at all. After saying that, I went to the sofa and was just about to lie down when I was called. I was startled, thinking that his emotional intelligence had improved. However, what he said was, Nova, there's a cloak in the cabinet that the old man specially uses when riding an electric bike. It's quite thick. You'll definitely not be cold if you cover yourself with it. Brother, are you out of your mind? Looking at Damien's smug smile, I clenched my fists and did a big thing. I walked to his bedside and gave him a gentle smile. But it was this expression that made Damien's expression freeze. What does this person want to do? Is she going to molest me? Then I quickly picked up the quilt from the bed in front of him and went straight back to the sofa without looking back. Damien was shocked by my action. Nova, if you don't want the old man to know that we're sleeping in separate beds, then please cover yourself with the warm cloak. Let's each sleep in our own place and not disturb each other. For the first time, I threatened him. It felt quite good. Beep. The target's trust value has increased by 20. Beep. The target's trust value has decreased by 10. Beep. The target's trust value has increased by 30. Finally, I fell asleep listening to the system's announcements. The next day, I got up at 5 o'clock, earlier than the chickens raised in the main residence. The purpose was very simple. Nova, why did you get up so early? The old man, who had just come back from his morning run, saw me busy in the kitchen and couldn't help but feel sorry for me. Does that kid at home always make you cook alone? I smiled gently and shook my head. He said that he didn't like my cooking before, but my cooking skills have improved. I want you to witness my efforts. The old man looked at the breakfast on the dining table. There were a series of Chinese breakfast items such as soup dumplings, fried dumplings, and spicy soup. His eyes immediately lit up. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he cleared his throat. It's excellent in terms of color, aroma, and taste. You've put a lot of heart into it, but don't overwork yourself. With that, the old man took a bite. 3 seconds later, a lot of flattering remarks reached my ears, and the corners of my mouth turned up. Damien, you must be sweating nervously. The grandson in your grandfather's heart is going to be replaced by a granddaughter. Think bigger. If you want to compete with the adopted eldest lady in Damien's family. When Damien got up, I watched from the corner as he sat on the dining chair. The dietitian didn't show up for a long time. He had a serious expression on his face. Aunt Yen, where's the dietitian? The old man has already come back from his morning run and is sitting on the sofa. Why hasn't he arrived yet? Aunt Yen, whose name was called, mumbled something that I couldn't quite hear clearly, but it felt like she was swearing rather harshly. I saw Aunt Yen walk up to Damien and say loudly, "Young master, because Miss Nova's breakfast is so rich and delicious." The dietitian felt ashamed and went to learn from her. The old man is sulking because you got up late. Suddenly, a stiff atmosphere surrounded them. Damien noticed my gaze and his eyes were full of murderous intent. Is this person determined to mess up the family before she'll stop? I innocently waved my hand, pretending to be weak. After that, the old man reprimanded Damien, saying that he didn't know how to respect others. I worked hard to cook every day, but all he did was complain that it tasted bad. But it seemed that the old man didn't know about my previous profession, until Damien said, "Old man, Nova used to be the squad leader of the cooking squad." The dining room immediately fell silent. After holding it in for a while, the old man snorted, "A female comrade served in the army and cooked for you, yet you still complained that it tasted bad. You lousy man." I burst out laughing in the corner. As expected, I was noticed by someone and Damien was furiously complaining in his heart, but I just didn't care and was determined to make him angry. The matter at the main residence came to an end, and then it was time to teach the bad guys a lesson and slap them in the face. During this month, I became a popular amateur star in the circle. I was good at variety shows, filming, and singing. I also promoted some unpopular professions on the shows. Violet, the daughter of my adoptive parents who recorded the identity swap with me before, seemed to be tired of her life and started to spread rumors about me. First, she revealed online that I was selfish and bullied my classmates when I was a child, and there were even a few witnesses from who knows where. Then she said that the success rate of my career as a breakup counselor was all due to violence, and she thought I didn't deserve this profession. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I waited for the opportunity when she couldn't help but expose her true identity. After about half a day, Violet started a live stream, claiming that I was extremely unfilial and sent my adoptive parents to prison. I still let the matter ferment. It wasn't until Damien couldn't help but want to explain on my behalf and say that I sent my adoptive parents to prison that I slowly posted something. As a result, I played my trump card all at once. The evidence showed that Violet gradually became a Saying fan, confused people, colluded with my adoptive parents to sell me, and there were also the previous rumor-mongering incidents. And her idol was Chi Yenji, who had confessed his love to me and was on the hot search before. As for the so-called violence in my profession, it was with the approval of the state. As long as I didn't kill anyone, it couldn't be blamed on me. Later, the police even posted a statement saying that I was the only breakup counselor in the city and asked everyone to be understanding. In the end, Violet and the people she colluded with were all put in prison. After this incident, I became the most influential artist in the entertainment industry. Bad guys would tremble when they saw me. Then came the offers from entertainment companies. At first, Damien was very confident that I would definitely go to his company, until another powerful company in the city also came to invite me. The two companies had fought like crazy for some artists before and later became bitter enemies. After learning about this, Damien increased the benefits, but I remained unmoved. The other company thought they had a chance and immediately sent someone over. "Miss Nova, please consider it carefully. Our benefits are better than anyone else's." The person opposite stared at me seriously, but I just smiled. "The name of the talent agency is Free Life, right?" At first, the manager didn't notice anything wrong until I took out a business card. "What's this for?" The manager looked puzzled and looked down. It said, "Free Life Talent Agency, Nova." He was in a daze and looked at me in disbelief. In fact, I just registered this company when I was drunk, but unexpectedly, I managed it quite well. Later, with the job as a breakup counselor, I stayed behind the scenes. Now that I showed this trump card again, the meaning was completely different. They all thought I was going to go to the other company, but in fact, I founded my own studio and signed a few young and handsome actors and beautiful actresses. After Damien found out about this, he got angry again for no reason. Originally, life was going smoothly, but suddenly Damien's real fiancée showed up out of nowhere. She was Astrid, the fourth young lady of the Nova family. One day, she publicly insinuated on Weibo that the popular amateur female star had sex with 4 or 5 young and handsome actors and colluded with her fiancé. But I knew very well that I had always been virtuous and would never do such a thing. So I simply showed the proof of founding my own studio to the so-called fiancé. And Free Life publicly announced that I was the boss, which caught netizens off guard. Not only the company, but also the comrades in the cooking squad in the army, the teachers, parents, and children at Xingxing kindergarten all came to support me. I was very touched by this, but the scene was so shocking that it was beyond description. As for the matter of stealing Damien, I also asked him and the old man in person. There was no marriage contract with the Nova family. It was probably just a rumor. Then they sued Astrid and took her to court. Strangely enough, on the day of the lawsuit, I only saw the bodyguards of the Nova family. Her parents didn't even show up. I thought these things were over, but I never expected that a rather Mary Sue plot would follow. It turned out that I was the 4th young lady of the Nova family. The reason was that Damien said that the Nova family came to apologize. When they saw me for the first time, they found that I looked very similar to the wife of the Nova family. Later, a paternity test was done, and the results showed that we were related by blood. Finally, I was taken back home and became rich again. The reason for getting lost was also simple. When I was a child, I got lost and ended up at Xingxing kindergarten. Originally, the principal wanted to call the police, but my adoptive parents, who claimed to be my biological parents, took a liking to me, and that's how it happened. After a long time, I finally heard the voice from the system host. The target's trust value has reached as high as 80. There should be a lack of an opportunity. I thought so too, so I simply discussed with the system to stage a play. When I learned that someone was preparing to harm Damien again, I thought I could play the role of the one who would cause the harm. 3 days later, the news that I had been kidnapped reached Damien's family and the Nova family. According to the system, Damien didn't believe it at first. It wasn't until the kidnappers called that he rushed over in a hurry. The one who kidnapped me was a collateral relative of Damien's family. He thought he deserved to be the dominant figure in the city, so he used all his connections to kidnap me. And it was he who ordered Astrid to use her beauty to seduce Damien. And besides, when Damien's parents had the car accident back then, it was also he who used a scapegoat to frame them. To put it simply, he was a narcissist and a psychopath, and all of this was told by the system. It had nothing to do with me. So when Damien rushed to the place where I was kidnapped, he went crazy. The man put a sharp knife against my neck and laughed wantonly. Damien, I didn't expect that your weakness is actually a woman. Hearing this, I rolled my eyes. Could you change these cliched lines to something more high-end? Nova, are you afraid of pain? Damien's sudden question left me stunned for a moment. A second later, I calmly said, yes, I'm afraid of pain. Then I heard his inner thoughts. I thought you were fearless, as if you were reincarnated as an armor. You rushed forward without hesitation even though you knew there were enemies. Where did all the things you learned in the army go? I wanted to curse back directly, but I held it back. Seeing that we were chatting happily, the kidnapper got angry and scratched my neck with the knife in a rage. My eyes flickered. I was just about to take this opportunity to act as if we were parting forever when suddenly the sound of police cars came from outside the warehouse. The kidnapper was startled, and the knife in his hand dropped to the ground, making a crisp sound. Me? Aren't you going to be the dominant figure in the world? Why are you so cowardly now? Come on, keep cutting me with the knife. I said carefully beside the kidnapper, but it still didn't work. There was nothing I could do. I could only use my last bit of stubbornness. I pretended to have a sarcastic voice, looked him up and down, and my eyes were full of disgust. I remember your son was sent to prison by Damien. In the end, you're still going to be sent to prison by him. How pathetic. Look at what you look like now. TSK, TSK, TSK. You call yourself a kidnapper. You're more like a traitor. As soon as the words were spoken, the air around me gradually froze. When the kidnapper picked up the knife and looked at me, his eyes were full of anger and murderous intent. I curled my lips and smiled, but in my heart, I was crying to the system, please minimize the pain when he stabs me. I don't want to die again. Host, it's a piece of cake. It's just that the target's emotions are a bit unstable. After saying that, I turned my head and looked at the figure running towards me not far away. It seemed that the other person didn't even care about his image. Nova, what on earth do you want to do? Why are you seeking death? Hearing his inner thoughts and seeing his actions somehow hit my funny bone. System, look. He looks like a wild monkey running at full speed. Go to hell. Just after I finished speaking, I found that a sharp dagger had been inserted into my heart. Sure enough, it was like being pulled by death. Even though the pain was minimized, I could still feel the blood in my body slowly draining away. I struggled to raise my head and looked at Damien, who had already run in front of me. A trace of panic quickly appeared in his indifferent eyes. He held my hand, but his fingertips were trembling constantly. His lips were also trembling unconsciously. I thought he wanted to say something, but the scene in front of me became more and more blurred. Vaguely, I seemed to hear a low, hoarse murmur. He was saying, so it was the last chance. Beep. The target's trust value is 100. Congratulations, host. The task is successful. You are free from now on. My name is Nova. I'm a 22-year-old female and the fourth young lady of the Nova family in the city. I have many unexpected identities. Unfortunately, due to an accident, I entered a loop. I experienced it 9,999 times. When it reached 10,000 times, I was ready to give up. However, I never expected that a patient who had been in a coma for several months would be the end of my loop. Finally, relying on his inner thoughts, I risked my life and completed the rebirth task. Now I'm lying in a hospital ward, looking at the familiar ceiling and lost in thought. Nova, you're finally awake. I slightly turned my head and saw that my parents in my memory were exactly the same as the ones in front of me. I felt as if I had been successfully reborn, or maybe not. My mother noticed that I was in a daze and asked specifically, "Do you still remember what happened before you came to the hospital?" I wasn't sure if the scenes in my memory were real, so I simply shook my head. Who knew that when my mother learned that I had forgotten, she sighed, looking very regretful. I should have known better than to let you go out alone. Now you've lost your memory. My father beside her pulled her over and looked at me seriously and said, "The state has awarded you a medal for bravery in the face of injustice. It's already been sent to our home. Let's go back and have a look." A medal for bravery in the face of injustice? I frowned and my mind went blank. Did I save someone in the real world? How come I didn't know? Until the next second, my father said, "That young master of Damien's family is still at the door. Do you want to let him in?" I was stunned. I even needed to be asked to let him in. Nova, don't be in a daze. He's here. The man in front was holding a big bunch of flowers and looking at me intently. His eyes had a touch of melancholy and the look in his eyes was ambiguous. At this time, my parents had already left, and only the sounds of my breathing and his were left in the ward. I looked at him, pursed my lips, and was silent for a few seconds. Damien? It's me. Damien put the flowers in his hand on the table. He picked up an apple from the fruit plate and looked at it carefully, as if he said casually, "If I hit your forehead with this apple, will the loop start all over again?" Hearing this strange sentence, I stared at him in disbelief and stammered for a long time, "You actually..." Before I could finish my sentence, Damien stuffed the apple into my hand. His voice was low and slow, and he said lightly, "Do you think you're the only one who entered the loop? I've been looping in this hospital bed for I don't know how many years." Suddenly, someone showed up and made me wake up. "Do you think I'll let her go?" At this moment, I was a bit confused, but suddenly I found that I couldn't hear his inner thoughts. "So are we over now?" The original meaning of this sentence was that the loop was over, but Damien mistook it as the end of the relationship between the two of us. His eyes became colder. "Nova, you made my trust value reach 100 and then you tried to escape from this world. You really don't take me seriously." After hearing this, I sneered and directly showed my attitude. Don't just blame me. Look at how arrogant you are. You keep saying you don't believe me every day, but your trust value keeps increasing all the time. Isn't it embarrassing? Just then, a sound of electric current passed through my ears, and I had to rub them. Damien had the same reaction as me. Just when I was about to ask again, that familiar figure appeared in my mind. Host, first of all, on behalf of all systems, we would like to offer our congratulations to you. Congratulations on completing the task. Secondly, there is a new task. Finally, please save the next human being who has lost confidence. When I looked at Damien, I found that he was also looking at me. But I reacted the fastest. Do you have a system? Damien shook his head. It appeared for the first time. It said that the system was born out of people's hope. I wanted to live because I was in a coma, and you. He hesitated to speak. You were so bored with life that you wanted to look for setbacks. Me? It turned out that I had been so bold before. A few seconds later, the system's voice rang out again. This time, both Damien and I could hear it. New task. There is a couple threatening to jump off a building at Undo building. Please choose whether to accept the task or not. Damien glanced at me. As a breakup counselor, you're the best at this. What about you? I frowned slightly with a serious expression on my face. Was our relationship going to break down just as the task started? Who knew that the next second, Damien smiled and said, Undo building belongs to me, and the 2 employees are also from my company. So as the boss, the most important thing for me at present is to comfort the other employees. It's crucial to avoid panic. From what he said, I came to the conclusion that this man not only cared about his employees but also had a lot of businesses. I subconsciously looked at him, as if I had made up my mind, and the corners of my lips turned up slightly. By the way, sir, do you think I'm suitable to be the mascot of the company? Or a spokesperson would be okay too. I'm not picky. I have no other motives. I promise to make your company full of joy. Damien met my eyes, and his eyes flickered slightly. The air seemed to freeze for a moment, overly calm. After a while, he said slowly, I don't believe that you have no other motives. From my perspective, the tips of the man's ears opposite were quietly turning red, as if he was hiding something. I pretended to be nonchalant and pursed the corners of my mouth slightly. He was still the same, an unbelieving and arrogant man. Please stop chattering, you two. There will be plenty of time later. Now, do you agree or not? It's a matter of life and death. The system's irritable voice startled me. It seemed that this system was different from the one I knew before. But it didn't matter. After all, my profession was to save the world. 3 seconds later, Damien and I said in unison, yes, I choose to save thousands and thousands of us. The end, finished.